one thing that all teachers can probably agree with, they are all looking for financial freedom. Teachers are notorious for having a relatively low salary compared to other jobs that require a 4-year degree. So today we're going to be talking about all sorts of different financial tips and tricks for educators. I'm sitting down with a financial planner who has his own company. He's also a teacher. He teaches a personal finance course at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and he is also my brother. We're going to sit down and talk about all sorts of different financial advice for teachers and ways they can approach financial freedom, because we all know that financial stress is no fun. So I think you're going to like it. Let's get ready. John, what's up, man? How you doing?
You have a cool setup here.
Thank you. I built it out myself. This is one of those situations where, like, we moved into this new place, and I had a studio in the old house that we were in, and then we moved, obviously, and now in the basement's unfinished. So it's like, well, let's do something like this. So what people at home don't see is behind us here is a couple of cat litter boxes and
it looks
a
just
home
the
gym.
same. Looks just the same as this. It is just like this. The whole basement. I didn't work out just over there this morning.
Yeah, it's all wood paneling all over the place and nice backdrops. But hey, thanks for taking the time here to do this, John. You're a financial planner.
I am,
and you also are a teacher at University of Nebraska-Lincoln, which is awesome. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so like you said, I am a financial planner, wealth manager, you could call it. Deal with people, not just their investments, but like their entire picture. Mm-hmm. So I call that I have 1.25 jobs. That's my one job. My quarter job is a couple years ago, after I started my own practice, the University of Nebraska reached out to me where I went to school, and they said, hey, we need someone to teach personal finance, because they want someone who, this is their business, they're out, they have the war stories. They're not just a graduate student who read a book and said, oh, let me teach you about it. So I just finished up my 3rd year of teaching personal finance at the University of Nebraska. So
did you ever think you'd be a teacher?
Had no idea. Never would have. Because we come from a family of teachers, right? Yeah. You're a teacher, dad's a teacher, mom is a teacher of sorts in the dance world. Never would have thought about it. Mm-hmm. I mean, it kind of like makes sense. But I really would not have thought. So I think after this semester, I think I've had 400 students come through.
That's awesome, dude.
I know, it's pretty sweet.
That's sweet.
I know.
Yeah, one of the things that I want to break down today, not only financial advice for educators, but then how to teach about finance, because that's something that I'm passionate about, but something that I truly believe, we do a terrible job of educating about personal finance. We did an interview a couple years ago with Damon John from Shark Tank, and he came out with a book all about how to teach, financial literacy to young kids, and I think it's super interesting. But then how do you actually effectively teach it to college kids, middle schoolers, high schoolers, elementary? What do you do? So
Can I give you my hot take?
Yeah. What's your take?
One of the things that is challenging. I took a personal finance class in high school.
Yeah.
And I can give a little bit more of my background. I was, investing when I was 14, was trying to get money in the market when it wasn't as easy as it is now. There were commissions. Had different family and friends say, take my money and invest it. We made sure that could decrease the commission. And I was really into it. And I took personal finance, I think my sophomore year of high school. And it was so boring. It was so boring. Yeah. And I even cared. And so for a lot of high schoolers, you take, even if you say you need to take one class, unless you really need to know that knowledge, it just doesn't stick with you. To be completely frank, because I meet so many adults that say the same thing. They wish they would have had personal finance when I tell them I teach at the university. And unfortunately, I think you forget that as a high schooler. It's just hard to care about filling out your tax form 1040 when you're 16 years old. So I think there's two options. One, there's one option. The only way to do it, I think every year of high school, at least one semester, you have to have the same personal finance topics just pounded into their heads.
Yeah.
I think that's the only way to do it. The same reason that you can walk to anyone, anywhere in the United States that's under 30 and say, can you tell me what the Pythagorean theorem is? And they'll say a squared plus b squared equals c squared, because it was pounded into our head from middle school on. what about personal finance
What about
topics?
explaining like, hey, what's the S&P 500?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Do you have an idea what the stock market is? Tell me about a Roth.
Yeah, what's a
right?
bond?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What's probably going to be more important for the future generation of America, knowing the Pythagorean theorem or personal finance concepts?
Yeah.
Probably personal finance concepts.
Well, especially when you look at what people care about.
Yeah.
Like, I truly believe the two biggest stressors that any person feels in their life are finance stress and health stress.
Yeah.
And I went to school for health education because like that's what I was passionate about. And I look at how we teach about that, and it's like, what are we doing? How are we not spending more time talking about these things that are so important? Now, at the middle school level, like we've done some teaching about finance and things like that, and it's really dry content, and it's hard to get the kids to be fired up about it. I'm a believer in small chunks from when they are in kindergarten all the way through when they are in high school. You can have like a class store at an elementary level. Like you can start teaching the kids the value of money, how to save, what taxes look like, and things like that. And then the other thing that I want to bring up with you before we really dive into advice for teachers, you're an entrepreneur. You have your own company. Talk about how you got into that.
You know, I never.
Oh wait, can I pause you one sec?
Yeah.
You talked about how at a young age you were investing.
Yeah.
I know I've told you this story before, but I so remember when we were in high school, it was a weird time between sports seasons. So we were riding together after school, and you were like, hey, I gotta go stop by a couple of these teachers' rooms. I'm like, all right, this is weird. And you'd go to the rooms and they'd give you an envelope. And I'm like, what's going on? And I asked you like, what are you doing? He goes, oh, they're investing with me. Like you were managing these teachers' money. Like they would give you some to invest. I thought that was the coolest thing ever.
Well, and I didn't solicit it, you know. I didn't charge a fee, so it's not illegal or anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what happened was other students were listening to some of these investment ideas I had. And at the time, you don't have much money. And it was probably a $5 commission to buy, $5 commission to sell. So because of that, if you have $100, you're already losing 10% in theory to these commissions that you're paying to like E-Trade. And so yeah, a few of those teachers, they overheard me and the other students talk about some of these ideas I had and what I was going to implement, and they just walked over and said, oh yeah, here, I'll write you a little check. Yeah. And so, you know, I had a newsletter. It was nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Because, people are, at the end of the day, it wasn't going to break the bank for these teachers. But for us students, when your net worth is $500 and you're putting half of that, it gets intense.
That's huge.
It's huge. Yeah, I know. So, so I guess it makes sense that now that I'm doing that for a living.
Yeah.
But, I didn't actually set out, I'd say, like at the beginning of my career saying, oh, I'm for sure going to be a business owner. So going back to your entrepreneurship point. But, I mean, growing up, though, you remember, I was always attracted to business type, like video games.
All the time, dude.
Remember, like Roller Coaster Tycoon? Okay, managing my own theme park, marketing expenses. I love that kind of stuff.
I was playing Madden and you were busy building a roller coaster empire.
Yeah, so massive. So many people there, made so much money. Wish that translated to real life. But, as far as entrepreneurship goes, a lot of times, you were the first one to tell me this. There is an aspect of luck involved, and you listen to almost any entrepreneur, they always talk about how often luck's there. But as you've told me in the past, luck's 10 years in the making.
Yeah.
And so I think about, for me, I was really interested as a high schooler, bought books, read those books about investing, went to college. That knowledge helped me get, advance in my finance degree. I became close with my professors because I was coming up asking questions. I was working harder than I think most were, not just because I was trying to just grind. I was simply interested, and I had this base of knowledge that was 10 years in the making. And then when the time came and the opportunity presented itself, it actually just made sense to start my own practice. And the way like technology is, it's just a lot easier to do that now than it maybe was 15 years ago.
Because I truly believe overnight success is a lifetime in the making. Where for you, it took you being a junior in high school, talking to teachers about investments, and then as an adult you open up your own firm. And then like luck, the thing about luck is you kind of create your own luck.
You kind of do. Well, can I share about you as a youth and like talk about right now?
Yeah.
Right. You had a video that went viral initially years ago, and I remember thinking this is startling, but maybe not surprising because I just so vividly remember how quick you were to get onto technology, and you purchased the iPhone 4.
Oh yeah,
And
the white one. The white one.
And I thought that was the most idiotic thing because you had
I didn't know that.
because you had a phone.
Yeah.
And you had an iPod.
It was a BusinessBerry, and a BlackBerry.
Yeah, I thought, why in the world would you need to buy something that you don't need it, and you're combining these? You already have them.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, was I wrong. but again, though, that speaks to you were onto that pretty early, and I think that's why you had this video blow up, and then you leaned into it, and you've worked so hard at it. Yeah. It was years in the making. It wasn't that you just happened to stumble upon it. You saw the potential in that one video, and it went crazy.
Well, thanks, man.
Exactly, like, these things aren't. They don't happen. Not necessarily. They don't just happen overnight.
Also, is happenstance a real word?
I think so.
I heard that one time on a podcast. I'm like, I love that. I don't know if it's a real word or not, but it works in so many situations.
Internet sleuths, put it in the comments if it's not a real word.
I'm gonna feel really stupid.
Yeah.
All right. So advice for teachers, financial advice. I obviously talk to a lot of different teachers all over the country, and I get a lot of feedback about different topics, and finance is something that is so important because as teachers, we all go into this profession understanding we are not going to be making an exorbitant amount of money.
Yeah.
We all know that at this point. We all read the articles, we all know about it. So what teachers want to know is, how do we find financial freedom?
Yeah.
With a job that, the average pay is something about $80,000 a year, but that I don't like the average with that stat because you have California, New York, you got the coast that really skew that, where like in South Dakota, man, our average pay here is something like $57,000 to $60,000.
I looked it up this morning, and it was like mid 58s. And again, average pay is so hard because when you get into the profession, it's going to be far lower than later. But at the same time, you're right. It's one of those professions where there isn't a giant income trajectory in teaching.
Well, you can see it. They map it out for you. You know exactly what you are going to make in 10 years. So I guess in a sense, it's easier to budget in that way. However, you don't have those big increases.
Yeah.
So 30,000 foot view, what is some of your advice that you would give to teachers?
Yeah, so much of financial planning is really looking out to the future. So with financial planning, what you're going to be caring about with teachers, you have to care about 40 years from when you start teaching, which is not attractive, and people want the money now. Side note, do you remember when I told you about going to this high school to talk about personal finance?
Yeah.
Okay, so I did. I was telling them a lot about how much to save. This is what you can have in retirement.
Was it in Lincoln or Omaha?
It was in Lincoln.
Okay.
And
shout out Lincoln, Nebraska.
And unfortunately, a lot of my questions from a lot of the students, particularly the male students, were, that's great that you can have that much saved up in retirement, but I want to be rich now.
Yeah.
And then also they had a bunch of crypto questions because I think they're all trying to get rich really quick.
Yeah.
I get the allure of that. Most people will not make money in those industries, like in crypto and like these get rich quick schemes. So you have to honestly put that aside. Like you have to just accept that getting wildly rich by just making a few investments is not going to happen to you. It's simply not going to occur.
Statistically speaking, you're probably not that guy.
You are not that person. It's not going to happen to you.
Yeah.
So you want to be wise with money now. You do want to enjoy life, and then you want to think out to the future.
So let's start first at that young teacher.
Yeah.
You are just entering the profession. You are now making you're getting the biggest paychecks you've ever gotten. And where do you go from there? That kind of year 1 to year 5, you're 23 to 28 years old.
Okay, so we're looking at what to do right away.
Yeah.
This is a financial concept. It's really simple, the one I'm about to share. Very simple. It applies to everyone, and it's not very fun. You have to live below your means.
I hate the B word. I hate the budget word.
I know. It's so unfortunate, but there is a reality that, and this does occur, there are people who make a lot of money in a year, but they might not have enough for retirement because they spend it all.
Lifestyle creep?
Lifestyle creep is there. Keeping up with the Joneses, that's so present. And in fact, I mean, we have the data. It's really unfortunate. Social media does not help with that because you look around and you think everyone is a millionaire. Everyone has a massive house, and that's simply not true. Yeah. There's a chart that I show in my personal finance class that there's all these questions that YouGov asked, and they said,
what?
The YouGov, they're like a polling company, and they asked like the general populace, like what percentage of Americans make $1 million a year? And the average that most people said, they thought like 20% make $1 million a year.
People at home, take your guesses. What do you think it's going to be? Put in your vote.
It's like less than 0.1% of Americans.
Really?
Yes, it's so small. And everyone thinks that everyone else is making much money because instantly on your phone, you can find people on yachts. It's probably not their yacht. As you know, with influencers, you don't do this. He's honest. There are a lot of people that they'll pay a company, they'll pretend to be on a private flight, but they're actually just stationary and they get 20 minutes on the private airplane that's on the runway, and then they have to get off and the next person comes on.
And I really think that influencers are going to be looked at in the way of we look at a lot of professional athletes now, where like we all know the stories of the Adrian Petersons, all these people or the Allen Iversons. They're broke now. Yeah. They lost all their money. But we have a long-term data set to look at for professional athletes. For influencers, this is a new game. We don't know what it looks like for that 20-year-old influencer who gets into it right away. What do they look like when they're 50? We don't have that information yet because it's such a new industry. I think it's going to be similar to that, where it's like, oh my gosh, remember this person who was crushing it? They're broke now. Yeah. Turns out all of that was hogwash and it wasn't real.
Well, and similar to sports, you get one injury, your career's over. For you and other influencers, there is an aspect that if the algo doesn't like you that week, you're not getting views, and you can't have that many weeks of that before you actually stop making any money. So we don't know what's going to happen in the future. As you know, a lot of influencers, they're not saving.
They're the opposite.
They are spending, and once that spigot is turned off, they're in deep trouble. Yeah. So that actually applies to everybody. You have to live under your means, and it's not very fun.
So what are the easiest things to cut out, right? How do you trim the fat the easiest if you're that teacher who's just getting into it, you're getting these big paychecks, you're thinking, I can just roll with this forever. Money comes in, I'm going to spend it all. Next month, I'll get another paycheck, I'll be good.
This is probably a concept that does apply to everyone. And no one likes the B word, budgeting. But I think what's more important than what I will teach my students, there are very few people that can keep track of every expense forever. It's actually somewhat cumbersome. And what I usually recommend people do is find a good software out there. Right now, like Rocket Money is a good free software that you can use just to track expenses. You might have to spend 1 month and do like a 1 month audit on yourself. So say pick the month and I'm going to track every expense that comes in. And I think you'll be surprised at where the money's going. We noticed it in a few ways when we were tracking it for our family, that we both saw it in the budget, and we also saw it when we were going through the drive-thru of Cane's, and the person taking our order said, "Oh, it's you guys again." Yeah. We realized, all right, we're probably spending too much at Cane's, and sure enough, we were spending $150 at Cane's. You just can't do that forever. But the biggest items are food and housing. So you have to be very careful not to get in over your head when you're picking a place to live. And it's very easy to. The banks will often approve you for more money than a financial planner would probably say you should spend. If you think about it, the reason they do that is because if you have all these different expenses, what's probably the one thing that you're going to work really hard to always make the payment on?
Your house.
Right? So they can have you in financial distress, and you're probably going to still make the payment, but the rest of your life might be miserable. So you have to be careful right up front with that, including rent. Rent can also get really high.
And that's like one of the critical things of like first-time home buyer grants, things like that is, well, you're taking a lot of young people, putting them into a house, and now they're extremely house poor. Yeah. And they've got money coming in, but all of it is going to their mortgage. Or like, I remember when I first started teaching, I was in a 1-bedroom apartment, not very nice, and I was spending $800 a month on it. Yeah. And I was disappointed in myself because I was like, man, I have to be able to get something nicer than this. Yeah. But in reality, I knew I couldn't because the money wasn't going to be there. I remember in those early days of of all of a sudden now I'm living myself, paying expensive rent.
Yeah.
I had student loans to start paying back, and then I had the call with our retirement system, and they're like, how much money do you want to be putting into your retirement, into your 403b, which is what we get as teachers? How much money do you want to put in there? So what's your advice to those early teachers? How much money should they be putting into their retirement?
This is a really good question. I actually think it can apply to how much to live off of and actually can provide some freedom. So there's a concept that you can coin it in a lot of different ways, but people will call it reverse budgeting. The idea being, if you put away money right away, the amount that you need to save, right? You put that away and you know that you're gonna be okay for retirement or other goals that you have. If you put that money away, it gives you a lot more freedom to spend what else you have. So there are some rule of thumbs. And if you're a teacher that's just starting out, you want to be having at least 10% of gross salary going to retirement. So not like what, you get your paycheck in your bank account and you say, oh, this is how much I make. Okay, not 10% of that, 10% of what your gross salary is. So if you are signing the dotted line and you see that you're making $60,000 a year, 10% of that would be $6,000 a year. You want to make sure that's going to retirement. For teachers, it's a little bit more challenging. So every state is different, but let's say South Dakota, you essentially have a retirement pension, and then you have an option to save additional retirement monies in a different type of account, like a 403b or a 457, all these. There's a lot of different names. You can look it up if you want to go into that. What's hard is you're putting away, I looked it up, that about 6% of your salary goes into the South Dakota retirement pension. And it's a little bit different because if you stay in South Dakota and you keep working, it can really pay off, but it's not the same as like a normal retirement account. And it's kind of hard for teachers. Like, what are you going to do? So what I would probably recommend, and it's a little bit hard, is pay what you need to in the pension, which can be very lucrative over time, and then try and put an additional 10% of your gross salary into some sort of retirement saving. It's not easy by any means, but that typically, like that rule of thumb, if you do that early on in your career, in your like early 20s, you should be set up well for a good retirement. That includes how much money you've saved, you have your pension, and then you have Social Security later. Because
that gives you that financial freedom later on in your, the third quarter of your life, right? As you get, you're tired, you're now wanting to travel, you've got the money saved up. And I think that's the thing that a lot of teachers do need to come to that conclusion, and myself included, is like, I'm not going to be balling during this career. However, one of the few financial advantages of teaching is the retirement. So you can be balling at the end of the career. That's when things can be great for you. So now let's fast forward.
Can I actually, I'll talk just a few more things on that. When you're starting off young, so an example I give in my class is, why you should start young versus starting later. And I actually got this when I was in college. One of my favorite professors, he would do a little bit of personal finance. He was mainly doing like advanced finance concepts, but we did a little bit of this. And he used himself as an example versus his brother-in-law. My professor squandered his 20s and 30s, all right, and then started saving. His brother-in-law was really good at saving early on. So I use just a chart, and I show if you start when you're 20, and then you retire at 65, which I know 20 is a little bit earlier than when you start teaching, but like you could probably start saving $100 a month when you're 20. What that would equate to, if you have that invested in the stock market, would be a little over $1 million by the time you turn 65.
Really?
It is. And however, if you wait till you're 40 and you want to get to the same point, you want to get to that little over $1 million, you have to save $800 a month when you're 40 just to get to that same point. And you probably by that at that time you would have put in a couple $100,000 if you wait till you're 40 versus if you started really young, you'd only be putting in like 50,000 because the market compounds on itself and grows over time.
Compound interest, beautiful.
Compound, it's just so beautiful. Say it in my ear.
Whisper that.
Whisper it.
Now you're speaking my language.
Yeah. So all right. So other things early on. All right.
Yeah. Go through these rapid fire.
I'll go through early on. Other thing too that would apply for a teacher and would apply to anyone else generally. You probably, if you have a retirement account that's not necessarily the pension, but you have like another type of retirement account you can use, you're going to want to most likely use a Roth account. Do you want me to explain the difference?
Yes.
Okay. So with retirement accounts, you get some sort of tax benefit at some point. What are now called traditional retirement accounts, which was really just retirement accounts before they made Roth, was that you put money in and you got a tax deduction that year. But then later in retirement, when you pulled the money out, then you were taxed.
Okay.
Roth is the reverse. You don't get a tax deduction when you put it in, but later in retirement, when you take the money out, you're not paying any taxes. So what you'd want to do is, all right, if you have $20 or let's 100, whatever the number is, would you want to pay taxes on that when your tax rate is low, or do you want to pay taxes on it when it's high? And for most people, early in their career is probably the lowest tax point in their life. So you'd want to use Roth early in your career when you're going to be paying the least amount of taxes on that money, versus later in your career. You might want to do traditional because you might be at a higher tax rate than you'll be in retirement when you pull the money out. So you'll almost always, I have yet to run into an example where someone shouldn't use Roth. It probably exists, but I'm becoming a master of fudge words because of the regulators. you most likely will probably want to use a Roth.
Gotcha.
So that applies across the board for most people early in their career.
Got it. That makes sense. Any other advice for that early on educator?
I think the big thing would be finding what that savings goal is. And if you can say, I want to save 15% towards retirement of my gross income, and then if you can hit that, then I think you can have a lot of freedom with the rest of your money and what you're doing with it. You might have other financial goals, other savings things that you want to do, but if you're not getting in over your head on housing and you're fairly conservative with the way that you go and spend money out on dining, you can make that happen. I give an example in a class or other presentations I give of a nurse and an ER doctor. And I use legit numbers. I talk to doctors about, all right, at what point would you start working if you just want to be an ER doc? What's your salary? And what can happen with a lot of doctors is that they just get done with school and then they start living like a doctor.
They start getting Escalades,
big house. It's very, very common. And I show that a nurse who just works a nurse career her whole life, just gets modest raises, versus an ER doc, how the nurse can have the same, if not more, in retirement as the ER doc. And mainly it's because you have more time to save, because an ER doc's going to spend 8 to 12 years in school versus the nurse who can be there in 4. And teachers are the same way. If you are diligent about saving, especially early on, you'll be good. Can I give one more example?
Yeah, keep going, man.
The other thing too, like just practically, I won't give the exact numbers, but my wife and I both were big retirement savers when we started our jobs. I started working full-time as a junior in college, and I was putting away like 10%, I think, to my retirement account, and then the company would have a match where they would do like maybe 6. So I was saving, in theory, 16% just to retirement. My wife was also really aggressive with that. And we are now 28, and in theory, we could not contribute at all to our retirement at all anymore, and we would have a fairly solid retirement.
Really?
We could just be done.
Just do it on the front end and
give it the time to grow. And we're not going to live a lavish retirement with what we have, but we could have a comfortable retirement if we just stop saving right now.
Yeah.
And that's starting from like 21 to 28.
I think one of the things that people early on in their careers need to realize, but shift their mindset on, is saving is sexy.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of saying like your spending habits early in your career are not going to be sexy. You're going to be saving. You're going to be living in that modest 1-bedroom apartment. You're going to be driving that car that you might have gotten in college, and you're going to keep driving it. You can't say, oh, this isn't a sexy lifestyle. Think of, no, it's sexy to save. It's like I am setting myself up for financial freedom when I want it the most. Most people probably want financial freedom when they are 55.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need financial freedom when you're 23. What I mean by financial freedom is like the ability to go out to eat and not have to worry about the expense of the bill.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think that's what most people really want. They want that feeling of, I can go to that restaurant, pay for my family, may even pay for somebody else, and it's not going to affect me. At 23 years old, you don't need that feeling.
No.
At 55, you really want that feeling. That's what people are striving for. So now let's fast forward. Now we're at the person that is, they're 30-ish, 30 to 40. They are in the heart of their teaching career. Yeah. They are now starting to have kids. They're ready for the bigger house. They need to have the bigger car. What is your financial advice to that demographic?
To that demographic. So you'd want to have this base of, I would say, like financial prudence already, where you're saving for retirement. If you haven't started, the best time to plant a tree was yesterday. The next best time is today. If you haven't started saving for retirement by the time you're in your 30s and 40s, unfortunately, you've missed out. But you can still get after it and still have a good retirement. It might mean sacrifices, but let's say you have been doing that and you've been saving. So you got to just keep on doing it, right? Which doesn't sound sexy, but keep on doing it.
Now, do you advise them going from like what you did, like this, putting 16% in, now you drop it down to 10?
No, I mean, you actually probably could drop it down to 10 if you started off higher at like a 16. Usually it's best if you can just keep that up. There are maybe some other savings tactics that you can do. So this is actually where I would say a financial planner can become beneficial for you. So we were talking about retirement accounts a lot, but in retirement, you might have retirement accounts or some non-retirement accounts. So I'm going to talk about a different strategy that I would say a lot of people in their 30s and 40s should maybe consider. If you've been living under your means, if you're even, as a teacher, you still will have raises that outpace inflation. What can you do to maybe set yourself up further? So aside from retirement accounts, there's another type of investment account. It's weird. They call it a taxable brokerage account. I don't like that term. What I call it with my clients, I call it a flex account. Cool. So retirement accounts, there's limits on how much money you can put in every year. There's all these different weird things with it. What I call the flex account, you can put as much money in, take as much money out, and you can have it invested and it grows. Now, there's no crazy tax benefit like these retirement accounts, but the benefit is there are some unique things that you can do that I would say if you do it in your 30s and 40s, it can set you up well for when you're getting close to retirement. And maybe we can talk about it in that stage where you might have a couple years where you could actually have very little like taxable income, but because you have this other account that you saved, you can do some unique planning things that can save over the course of then your retirement. I've seen things that you can do where it could save $1 million in taxes.
Really?
Yes, straight up. Which we can talk about
even
that.
For the person that is making, at that point that you're probably 70 to 75,000 in, their salary, they'll be able to save that much in taxes?
Yes, because if you think about when you get to retirement, people will often retire around 60, 65. Maybe you could push it to 70. How long people are living nowadays, you still might have 30 to 40 years of retirement, which is a long time. And so there are some tactics that you can do when you approach retirement, especially if you've saved in this non-retirement like flex account that I call it. You can do some unique planning things. So if you're in your 30s and 40s, if you have your financial house in order and you haven't started that account, I think it's well worth it because it's money that you can put in there, you can invest it in whatever you want. It can grow and you can take the money out whenever. Whereas with retirement accounts, apart from some specific circumstances, you're typically limited to taking money out until you turn 59 and a half. And even at that point, you still might have some different taxes you need to pay, or it might not be the smartest thing to do. So there are some things that you really that's what I would really consider if you're a teacher. Start maybe diversifying, not necessarily your investments, but maybe the tax classification of your investment accounts, which sounds, again, complicated, but it's actually pretty simple and it can be very powerful.
Okay, so now this teacher, they're starting to have kids. They have way more expenses in their everyday life. How should they change their budget?
I have found, right now we're giving what I would call like mass-produced financial advice, right? We're giving, or financial education. Advice is a weird word to use. But
hear that, regulators?
Regulators, not advice, educational purposes only. But it's, every person I have found truly is different. Like every person I work with, there's not the exact same person, but there are some principles that you can follow. If you don't track your expenses, they'll just like get out of hand. I've heard someone talk about tracking your expenses being, it allows for you to now tell your money where it's going to go versus your money telling you where it's going.
That's a good way to put it.
Because people, it can just get crazy out of hand. And yeah, you're going to have more expenses with kids and different aspects of life, but that is actually why if you start really early, like let's use like my wife and I, let's say that we have a situation where, hey, we actually have more expenses coming up than we expected. Well, you actually can maybe pull back on your retirement saving because you saved so well early in your career. And again, you have to do a little bit of math to figure out whether you can do that. That's where there's probably, you can ask Grok, you can go ask a financial planner. They can help you out and give you some details as to what you can do there. But it all comes back to like tracking your expenses, and then what did you do before? Did you set up your financial house in order? Because then you could perhaps pull back on your retirement saving and still be okay. Other things, you can look at increasing your income, which I know sounds, easier said than done. But there is an aspect that's missing from personal finance where people often talk about how can you decrease expenses. Are you going to be buying raw beans and cooking those in a pressure cooker, and you might save $15 a week? What can you actually do to increase your income? Side hustles, that term is a little hard for people to say, just do a side hustle.
Yeah.
It's not that easy just to do that.
Yeah.
But in teaching, there are some options. I know you probably would know, more than I would. What are some options for teachers? Let's say they need to make an additional $200 a month, which can go a long ways. How could they do that?
Yeah, we're living in the era now of DoorDash, of Instacart, of all of those types of jobs, hobby jobs, where you can make a little bit of extra money. There's a number of people that I work with, man, like it sucks that it has to be this way, but they'll, at the end of the day of working, they'll go work at Target, they'll go work at Hy-Vee, shout out Hy-Vee for the Midwesterners. They'll do jobs like that, which will, make them some extra money. Do I wish we lived in a world where teachers didn't have to do that? Absolutely. I wish. However, we can't just keep wishing money into our bank account. That's not going to work. And we are trending in the way of education where we're not going to see massive increases in our salaries. So we have to be smart budgeting and how you have those side hustles. And then the other thing is where a lot of teachers don't necessarily want to hear it. We have the summer where we can be making some money. Now, for some people, they have a bunch of kids at home and they cut back on daycare costs by having their kids, taking care of the kids at home. Awesome. You're saving money that way. That's great. Some people, they don't want to work in the summer, but then they are going to feel the financial stress of the lifestyle they're living. Well, the low-hanging fix is go get a part-time job. And that sucks. Yeah, adding more work is no fun. But sometimes you have to do what you have to do. I think there's way more benefits of feeling less financial stress and being able to take on another job at that cost versus the every night you've got the money anxiety. That's a terrible anxiety to feel. There's been times in my life where I felt that money anxiety, and that is like the world is coming in on you. So there is that point where you're like, you know what? Even though door dashing is not a lot of fun, I will feel better when I go to sleep at night knowing I made an extra $200 versus thinking the walls are closing in on me. I'm going to get evicted out of this house. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think teachers, there's some unique opportunities. You can get a part-time job. I'm not sure what you see from opportunities. Can you do some sort of online, I won't say
online
tutoring. I know some people, they do some sort of, like English teaching for other foreign countries that you can. I know someone who wasn't even a teacher who that was a part-time gig where they could set their hours and they could do a singular hour, make maybe $25, $30, which you think, oh, that's not much money. But if you do that a couple times a week, I mean, you really can start doing a lot there. I mean, you can make up a car payment.
Absolutely, you can. So this hypothetical teacher, what other advice do you have for this one right in that age demo?
So if you're, in those middle years, I would say you start running the risk of making some irrational investment choices. So here's what I mean. It's all about staying invested. And when you're younger, it's a lot easier when the market's going down to not get emotional because you're like, I have 40 years, I'll be fine. But as you get later in your career, and let's say you have, a couple $100,000 saved in your retirement account, and then you see it, evaporate by 20% in a couple weeks, and then it goes down even further, people get really spooked. And that's,
do you really think, like a teacher, by the time they're 40, can have a couple $100,000 in their retirement?
By the time they're 40, I think it's definitely possible, especially if you're aggressive. Yeah. Now, granted, I would say that's not enough for you probably to have a comfortable retirement. You probably are going to want more. But by the time you're like 40 or in your 40s, I think the numbers could get there. You have to be diligent if you're saving a lot, and then there's typically going to be some sort of match by the employer. It can be up that high.
Are you able to, like, let's say somebody early on got into investing because it's so easy now with Robinhood and all that stuff. are you able to take those investments and plug it into your 403b?
Yeah, in theory you can. Let's say you open up a retirement account, but it doesn't always make sense to do it. Sometimes it does. They call them rollovers, and sometimes you can roll that other money into the 403b. Or if you have 403bs from different different states, that sometimes you can roll those together. But again, every state's different on what's like the best retirement plan. But going back to like staying invested, so this happens a lot too, like later in your career that you might get scared. I worked at a place that had a lot of clients, so I saw a lot of people who are really, really sharp people. Okay, great business acumen, and when the markets get hairy, they are ready to sell everything. And I use this example where in the 2008 financial crisis, the stock market in the U.S. lost like 50% of its value. And I have this chart that shows different headlines around that time. So in later 2009 was the bottom, and it only went back up from there. But even as it was recovering, you had all these headlines saying that there's more foreclosures, like it's getting worse. But the stock market actually was in recovery. So I show this chart where if someone wrote out, the stock market, I say if you had $1 million in 2000 and you go to '08, and let's say the market's going down and you pull your money out even before it hits the bottom. So you actually think you made a smart decision, and you don't get back into the market until the headlines start turning to, oh, we actually might be in a recovery, things are fine. Because you missed out on a lot of that, like the actual stock market recovery, because you were just sitting on the sidelines. That $1 million by, I think the data I had was 2024. If you just stayed in the market, would have been $4 million. If you took your money out, and then for just that short period of time, you would only have $3 million. And it can make a huge, huge difference. And anytime the markets go down, people are ready to pull everything out. And it's easier when you're younger to stay in because you have so many more years. But even in your 30s and 40s, people get spooked. And then especially in your later years.
You sent that to me at one point when the markets were turbulent, like they've been the last probably 5 years. And it gave me a lot of comfort. It showed, doomsday headline followed by the next day, the S&P 500 had a 6% return. Yeah. It's like, those are huge days. You want to be in on those huge days.
You have to be in on those huge days. And typically, the best days in the stock market are usually coming after or right around the worst days. And if you miss out on those best days, that can completely wipe out your retirement trajectory. It absolutely can, because a lot of the market over time, you are relying upon these a few big days that happen, and you want to be invested during those.
All right, keep giving us more.
A couple other things too. So early in retirement, early in your career, or even your middle stages, you do want to be a little bit mindful of what you're putting your money into. So most retirement plans now, you'll automatically be put into what's called a retirement date fund, or like a target date fund. And so the idea being that what the fund will do is it'll say, all right, pick a date around when you might retire, usually 40 years after you start working. And it'll be invested in mostly stocks and some bonds. And then over time, it'll gradually move you to bonds versus stock. And the reason why is because bonds are typically considered safer. They don't return as much as stocks do, right, the stock market, but they're typically considered safer. So as you get closer to retirement, you then are in a safer portfolio. That is a good way to do things, but it's not the best way to do things. So, some market data. Over any 1 year period, I pulled pure US market data going back to 1900. Over any 1 year period, how often do you think that if you looked back a year that you were positive at any time in the stock market from 1900 to now? How often do you think you are positive with your money? You've made money over that previous year.
Every year, you would hope.
So even though, there's a lot of times where the markets are down though.
Yeah.
So do you have
I'd probably say 50%.
Yeah, which is a fair look. Almost any day you have about a 50% chance of being positive or negative in the stock market. Over any one full year period, it's about 75% of the time that you're positive.
Really?
Okay? But let's go a step further. Over any 5 year period, about 90% of the time you're positive. Any 10 year period, it's 96% of the time you're positive. And over any 20 year period, you have always been positive.
Markets always go up.
Now, granted, in any 1 year, at any one point, you might have big declines. But if you hold out, you have a good chance of being positive. Now, again, past market returns are no indication of future market returns. But history is a helpful guide, right? We use that to inform our future decisions. And so you really want to be invested in the stock market. So when you're younger and you get into these target date funds, I personally help my clients not be in those and be in all stock like investments, because you don't need bonds when you're younger. If you know, using historical data as your guide, that over time I'm going to be positive in these stock investments that vastly outperform bonds, then you want to be in stocks. And I would say even in your 30s and 40s, people think, oh, I need to get into bonds now. That's not necessarily the case. If you can say in 10 years, using historical market data as your guide, I have a 96% chance of being positive in the stock market, why be in bonds that are going to return you less than half probably of what stocks would return?
That makes sense. Okay, so a lot of people listening and watching, they'll be like, wow, this is so over my head. I just want to hire somebody to do this for me. Two-part question. One, should teachers get a financial advisor? Two, who should they go with? Maybe not who should they go with. Who should they be weary of? Who should they avoid?
This is hard because, I'm obviously in the industry, and I meet a lot of people where I will tell them, you probably don't need a financial advisor. You like the stuff, you're doing the research, you have some investment acumen, you maybe don't need some. I tell people that a lot. But most people don't actually want to do the work to learn it, because it is complicated, right?
It's a full-time job to learn it.
It is, and I'm always learning. And there's always someone that knows more than me in some topic. So I'm always learning. And
you've spent decades learning about this stuff.
I mean, yeah, I know I'm like young, but I started pretty early of like reading books on this stuff. And there's just so much you can learn. And then you start getting into the planning aspect and the tax code and all these different things. Now, I would say there's no perfect answer for when someone should get a financial advisor or if they should get one. I have found that it can often be a part of outsourcing that's beneficial for your life. So, like for me, I can learn how to do a lot of plumbing in my house. I don't want to learn that. And also, the cost of making one mistake in plumbing in your house can be devastating. And as I showed you the data earlier, if you make one bad financial move in the market when the market's not doing well, you could be missing out hundreds of thousands of dollars later in retirement, millions later in retirement, which is not an exaggeration. So I would say there are some good rule of thumbs on people to avoid. All right, you probably want to avoid people who they are essentially just insurance salesmen masquerading around at using the term financial advisor.
I've always been confused by that, where they wear these two different hats that seem to be completely different worlds, but how are they qualified to be doing your insurance as well as your investing? That seems so, that's like, it's like going to the car mechanic and he says, I can do your engine, fix your engine, and I can also do the plumbing at your house. It's like, wait a second. These are vastly different things. Both are involved with money and fixing something, in the analogy, but they seem like completely different skill sets. I'm always confused by that.
That's true. There are some groups that are pushing for regulators to have definitions and to not allow people who are just sales people for insurance companies to call themselves financial advisors.
Because do they take a test to be an advisor? Did they pass things?
There are a lot of these different tests, and it kind of depends on how you're compensated, different licenses that you get. But ultimately, then there are some people that they know the insurance well and they know other financial planning. But I will say there are some firms out there that most would be familiar with that are well known for they're just doing insurance sales. Yeah. Do you want me to sling arrows?
Yeah, do it.
Okay. One of the popular ones I have some great stories from is Northwestern Mutual.
Really?
Yes.
I think everybody's got a story about somebody who's a month out of graduation getting, they graduated a month ago. All of a sudden, they get a job at Northwest Mutual, and then they start calling everybody, and they now are going to want to manage your money.
You have someone who graduated as a biz ad major. They can talk to people. They don't know a lick about finance, but after a month of training, they're ready to manage Granny's entire nest egg.
And then they leave Northwestern Mutual after 2 years.
And then they leave pretty quick, right? Yep. And, so part of my...
Sorry if you work for Northwestern Mutual. That's just the experience that everybody seems to have.
Yes. There are like really good people that work at those companies. Okay. I will say when I was in college, I was at a career fair. I was trying to get an internship. And I came by a company and they said, hey, this is who we are. And I said, oh, what do you do? And they said, what do you think you do? And I said, well, I see that there's mutual in your name and I know what mutual funds are. You probably deal with investments. And they said, you'd be perfect for our internship. It's actually not like the same thing. And I go through this internship, okay, with this company. I'll tell you the name in a little bit. And they do some training. And I tell them, I said, hey, I love investments. Financial planning is interesting, but I just really don't want to be selling life insurance to my friends and family. They said, don't worry, that's not what you're going to do. 2 weeks in, that is exactly what it was. It was Northwestern Mutual.
Yeah. Shout out.
Shout out. And what it also is funny is my last day, like the day before I was going to quit, like this internship, they had like the national company come in and make an intern marketing video. And so I'm in this video, and I get calls from people years later saying, hey, like, you know, I'm years younger than you, but we grew up in the same town. I saw you in this video.
Really? I didn't know that.
Oftentimes, like, what was your experience like? So I'll tell them. And again, there's really good people that work there.
Yep.
Really good people. But I have to get some examples. A lot of these firms, there are other ones like them, where everything that you do, any question that you have for them always ends in you buying a whole life insurance policy from them. These are policies that are insurance products that are really expensive. They historically don't have great returns, and they give a really fat commission to the advisor.
Yeah.
I had one friend who he had a kid, and he asked me. He said, "I give you 2 stories really quick.
Yeah.
Is it okay?
Give me 3.
All right. I'll sling arrows." So he said, "Hey, I had just had my son, and I want to like consider what I should do for saving for college for him. What do you think?" So I gave him some different options, what I think they should consider. He's an engineer, and I found that engineers are often DIY investment people, and he's a friend of mine, so I'm not trying to sell him anything. I'm just saying you maybe would want to do these things. I know you're going to do it on your own. I'm clearly not trying to get any business from you. He's like, okay, well, I have a friend who works in Northwestern Mutual. I'm going to get his opinion. I said, please tell me what his opinion was. So he comes back to me. He goes, all right, here's what he wanted me to do. Sure enough, he wanted him to get a whole life insurance policy. In these policies, they have estimates for how the policy will do, like this insurance product will do over time. And these policies aren't known for being conservative in their estimates, right? They're probably going to make themselves look better than they are.
Yep.
His son was just born. He wanted to buy this whole life insurance policy. This whole life insurance policy didn't break even on how much it was worth based off projections until year 20. Meaning that for 20 years of putting money into it, it wasn't worth as much as how much you put in until the kid turned 20 years old.
That's crazy.
So he could have just been putting his money into a savings account and had a little bit of interest and would have had way more money than putting in this whole life insurance policy.
Yeah.
This guy said this is what you should do for your kid's college. It's something like that.
Do that now, like that salesman, that person, do they really believe that it's the beneficial thing, or are they just kind of just trying to get the commission for it?
Can I tell you another story?
Yeah.
All right, I think it can answer that question.
Yeah.
Had a friend who is a mutual friend. I'll tell you off air who it is, and he's fine with me sharing his name. But he was in college, and his undergrad roommate, got an internship at Northwestern Mutual, sold him a whole life insurance policy. All right, guy ends up quitting, but the policy's still there. So the guy that he was working for now gets like a lot of the premiums from that, whatever. And years later, friend reaches out and says, hey, I don't even know what this thing is. Can you do some research? So I'm trying to do research. You can hardly find any information on it. And I have a decent idea of what it is. And I say, I don't know if this is the best thing for you for X, Y, and Z reason. And he's like, can you just call this new advisor that they gave me and just like talk about it? I'm like, all right, sure. I'll call him. Get on the phone with this guy. Super nice dude. Real smooth talker. Okay. Not in like like skeezy, like
He's just like, good. Charismatic.
Okay?
Charisma goes a long ways.
So we're talking about this policy, and these whole life insurance policies, they have call it an investment piece, and they have a life insurance piece. And so I'm talking about this, and I'm like, okay, so I tell him, I say, you would agree that the investments in this thing are way too conservative for what this guy should be doing for his investments. And he goes, yep, it is. Say, all right, you would also agree that the life insurance is so low on this, and he has the friend has so many student loans, he really should get something with a lot higher life insurance to cover his debts if he were to die. He's like, yep, he should. And I said, so you would still say this is the best thing for him to be in? He said, yes. I kid you not, swear on my life, that is exactly how the conversation went. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll be done. And I don't think that he was trying to be malicious. I think for a lot of people, that's their training.
Yeah.
That's what the system puts out. This is what they should do, and so they go with it.
That's what they
I don't
know.
think they're being malicious. I do not think so. But I don't think that the training is terribly robust.
Interesting. Huh.
So I would say for most people, just no, they're not all bad. You should just be weary of someone who every solution to their problem ends up with some sort of insurance product, and know that the commissions on those things are pretty high.
Yeah. Gotcha. Or just rapid fire, are there any companies that you're like, I think for the most part you can trust these people?
I would say there are so many firms out there. What you want to ask them is, are you willing to be upfront with me about how you get paid? Because that's what a lot of these insurance policies, annuities, they can make so much money, and it's in the fine print. And they might give you a sheet that says this is how much they get paid, but you're reading so many pages that it's not worth it.
Yep.
You should also ask if they are what's considered a fiduciary. Now, everyone says they are a fiduciary, but you should ask them. And what this means is that you are legally required to be acting in their best interest at all times. There are some professions, I don't know exactly how it works, but they can simultaneously, and they don't have to tell you, they can have their fiduciary hat on, and then they can also have their salesperson hat on that's not a fiduciary. And you don't really know exactly when. So you'd want to ask someone, are you a fiduciary at all times? And that's what you should probably ask and be mindful of.
Yeah. All right. Are we ready to move on to the next demo?
I think we're moving on to those who are like late career,
Yep.
right?
Late career. They are within, let's say, 10 years of retirement. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, and so when you're within 10 years of retirement, this is when you want to be very strategic about your different investment accounts and where you're putting money. Because there are some different financial planning strategies, Roth conversions, different HSA things that you maybe use throughout your life, health savings accounts, that really come into play after you retire. And, for some people, they might say, I can't retire until I'm 65 because I need, at 65, you're eligible for Medicare, right? It's health insurance for old people. And you have really good health insurance, typically decent health insurance through whatever school district that you're in. And a lot of people, they say, well, I need to wait until then. Well, there are actually some different options of what you can do. And based off of how well that you planned before with different Roth retirement accounts, that flex investment account I talked about earlier, you can actually keep your income low, and then you're actually eligible for health insurance tax credits, and you can actually keep your health insurance low. Like you could be paying, depending on where your income is at and how you play the game, like the tax game, you could have $0 of health insurance premiums.
Really?
Or just a few $100s in health insurance premiums. 100%. Again, it's all about being strategic. And unfortunately, if you are just about to retire, sometimes there's not much you can do if you haven't built this financial base. But that's why I would say for a lot of people, at least maybe talk to some financial planner, or maybe find one that will charge you hourly when you're in your 50s, just to say, here's where we're at now. What could we do before we maybe retire in 10, 15 years? That's probably worthwhile because there are so many different aspects between, your traditional accounts, your pension, Social Security planning, Roth conversions, an endless number of different financial topics. It could probably be worth it at that point to do something.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And that's where, really quick, with these different financial strategies, what can happen is you can retire, and depending on your situation, you can have years where you actually are in a very low tax bracket, very, very low. And if you recall from earlier when we talked about Roth versus traditional, the traditional, that's the money that you put in, you get a tax benefit then, but then when you pull it out in retirement, you pay tax on it. So let's say you have a period of time where you planned well and you might be in really low tax brackets. What you can do are these things they're called Roth conversions, where you can take money from these traditional retirement accounts, and when you take the money from those, you might be paying very little tax on it, and you now have set yourself up for an even better future retirement, even if you just do some things right when you retire. So for people who are actually looking at being strategic, it's worth it to at least look at, maybe doing the research yourself or hiring a financial planner a few years before you retire.
Really? That's when it's definitely worth it?
I think in my opinion, I think it's definitely worth it, because I truly have seen some of these tactics result in, over the course of the rest of their lifetime using financial planning software, save hundreds of thousands to $1 million in taxes over the rest of their life by doing these things in these few years where you might be paying very little in taxes.
Yeah. Okay, what else you got for that demo? Because this is a demographic, a person that I don't know what I don't know. right? There's so many questions that people will have as they are near retirement that like, I never thought about that when I was 27 years old. So what are those situations where things that they need to know as they are approaching the retirement days?
You really want to get your retirement knowledge and like pension information in place. Like really understand what your situation looks like for your specific state retirement plans, because every state's different. And so you might have mass produced, financial advice for educators. You really do need to go talk to your benefits person and say, hey, please explain this in detail. So let's say you're going to retire and you have this pension. Well, you can pick oftentimes between a pension that runs out when you die or a pension that runs out when your spouse dies, if you died first, right? And that's really important because you might actually get a little bit less from the pension every month, but it'll survive like your spouse. Or I think South Dakota is what it is. If you were to die, your spouse would then get 50% of your benefit. So that then doesn't live in a silo. That plays into what does Social Security look like, when to take Social Security. Honestly, I wish I could say do this, this, and this. It truly is so specialized to each person. But in the course of this conversation, we've probably talked about 8 to 10 different big strategies to consider, and you want to start looking into that if you're at that point. Yeah. I would say we're in the unique time with AI that it's not the best for financial planning. Like there are things where I'll go to Grok and I'll say, give me 20 interesting things about Roth IRAs. It'll still get things incorrect, so don't trust it blindly. But you can use it as a guide to say, what are things I should consider for my retirement? And here's kind of our situation. And it might give you different ideas to go do some research on. And I wish I could say, do this, this, and this. It really is specialized to each person because there's so much to consider.
So it sounds like in order to be set up the best for your retirement, it's those 20s, 30s, 40s years where if you're strategic, really the end outcome is going to be okay.
If you want the biggest tree, you had to have planted it a long time ago. Yeah. But there still are things that you can do, and all hope is not lost. You might have to work a little bit longer, but there are options for what you can do. You talked about earlier being a health teacher. I think that people should actually consider really caring about your health as you get into those older years, because your quality of life, health insurance, like health expenses can be a lot higher. Those things really have an impact, and it can actually be worth it to spend on your health earlier on.
And I'll kind of contradict on what you said earlier. Like I tell people the first investment you need to be making is into your health first.
That's fair.
So if you're strapped on money early on, I think it's worth it to invest in good food and a gym membership rather than your retirement early on, right? Like you should obviously have money in your retirement, but I just think you should invest in your body right away. Yeah. I think that's very, very important.
It is very important. I think the benefit is that with a little bit of planning, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. And so I think you can have, especially if you're starting early on, you can have your retirement taken care of by knowing how much you're putting into it. You can have your health expenses taken care of, and you have to live below your means, but that's okay. And there's a lot of freedom in it, and people actually, I think, have more fun. Like you said, now that you don't have the financial insecurity, life can be a lot of fun, even if it doesn't mean that you're taking a vacation every year. Yeah. There's some issues that people have when they graduate from college and they get a job. They think that they need to live the lifestyle of what they grew up with.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yes,
that was exactly. We've had this conversation.
Yeah. Like this is the house I grew up in. Okay. House I grew up in was pretty big because your parents might have been late in their careers making the most money they'll ever make, and you think that's the house I deserve. Or you took a vacation once a year or twice a year, and you think, I deserve to take a vacation twice a year because that's what I grew up doing.
This is the lifestyle I'm used to. I want to keep doing that. It's like, okay, ask your parents what they did at 23.
Yeah.
Were they grinding or were they sitting on a beach in Mexico?
And most likely, they were grinding.
Yeah.
They were grinding. Now, I will say, some of the responsibility has to fall on parents to teach their kids. I have found that a lot of times, I would say young people, they don't have much financial knowledge and their parents didn't teach it because I think their parents actually don't know for sure either. Yeah. And there is an aspect, you should probably remind your kids, hey, we have this because we worked really hard in our careers and we're late in our careers and we're making the most money we'll probably ever make. You need to be mindful that when you get out and you get your first job, you might have to have roommates and be in an apartment. You know, you might not be able to afford a big house initially, especially if you're moving around places. Like a rule of thumb, just as we're talking about just different financial concepts, rule of thumb is if you're not going to live in a place for at least 5 years, you probably shouldn't buy a house because of all the fees associated with it from buying and selling. So you probably are going to want to rent, which isn't as fun as owning a house. But that's maybe what you have to do. And you might have to have roommates. And it might be challenging at times when a roommate's loud, but you know what?
You do what you gotta do.
Yeah, you're not entitled to having a big house or like a big apartment. You're just not.
Nobody owes you that.
No one owes you.
All right, are we ready to go to some questions from the audience?
Yeah,
Questions from
audience
followers?
questions. Let's do
Okay,
it.
so here's how I'm going to do this. I'm going to read some of these off, and this goes against everything that you believe in when it comes to advice. Rapid fire, quick advice.
Perfect.
Okay?
Yes. Missing context, it's the best.
All right, I'm approaching year 30 of teaching. My financial advisor is confusing. Suggestions.
Well, I would imagine with that question, they probably have a financial advisor that doesn't know exactly what's going on, or there's someone that they might have 600 different clients and they don't want to do the research on your retirement plan. So you maybe want to consider a different financial advisor.
Okay.
Because as you heard when we're talking about in this long form video, how many different strategies you want to be implementing throughout your life to set you up for retirement. They're approaching retirement, but they have to consider Social Security. They have to consider the different types of accounts they have, health insurance later, Roth conversion, all of these different things. They maybe should get advice from someone who's not confusing them.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm going to summarize this question. How do I save enough during the school year to not have to work during the summer? I get killed in California taxes every year.
Yeah, so almost like two questions there. I would say, unfortunately, you have to plan. And you have to recognize, here's how much I spend per month. Therefore, I need to be saving that amount throughout the school year. Most school districts, correct me if I'm wrong, they allow you to either take, just during the school year, or you can have it split up even throughout the summer.
I can take 9 paychecks and spread it out through 12 months.
That's probably a wiser move than just taking it all initially and then struggling during the summer. But what you have to do, as we talked about, you have to track your expenses, because if you don't know what you're spending, how are you going to be able to plan?
God, that B word budget.
I know.
Is it okay for teachers to splurge on name brand items like aloe, like workout clothing? I love this stuff. It's expensive, but it's
I
nice.
don't know name brand stuff. Like I told you, this is like a clearance Joseph A. Banks suit.
It looks nice.
I appreciate that, but I just don't know name brand stuff, right? I think going all the way back from like the strategy of reverse budgeting, if you can get your saving in order, if you know that you're covered on your saving, you've taken care of that big responsibility, have fun with the rest of your money. Yeah, have some honestly, I think that's like part of financial freedom. You can have some quality items, and I think you should find the things that provide a lot of value to you. Like in your life, are there things that, hey, this provides so much value that's worth paying a premium for?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely like, for me, it's like the gym I go to. Shout out Origin Strength Sioux Falls. You guys rock. It's worth it.
Yeah.
I'm spending $150 a month on it. However, it is so worth it for me.
100%.
I think so. All right. Should teachers be aggressive Should teachers be more aggressive in investing, knowing they have job security?
Yeah, I think you can be. Now, I would say that job security isn't guaranteed. We were both in middle school when 08 happened, and there was a wild thing in our school district where they let these teachers, essentially told them, like, you're being let go in the middle of the school day. So we as middle schoolers walk around like, why are these teachers crying?
Yeah.
Right? They got let go.
Yeah.
So
during a time of financial unrest.
yes. So there isn't perfect job security. Now, granted, yes, like there is more than maybe other industries, but I would say it's financial planning for most people is if you're young, even mid-career, you can be aggressive with your retirement investments, because the data we talked about, over any 10-year period, markets have historically been positive 96% of the time.
That makes sense. I've got $10,000. Where's the best place to start investing?
Great question. This is what's so unfortunate. It is very dependent on your situation. So maybe another financial concept would be order of where to put your money first. And so I would argue that you should be if you have money that you need to invest, you should be looking at your retirement account. Is there any sort of match that the employer is doing, where if you put money in, the employer's putting that money in, like they'll put the same amount in as well? Like if you put 1,000, they'll put in 1,000, or if you put in 5% of your income, they'll put in 5%. that's free money. That's like 100% return on your investment. My opinion is, apart from really unique situations, you should always be taking advantage of that. So in this person's situation, I would say, have you done that yet? Have you built up an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of your expenses in case something bad happens? Do you have other retirement accounts? So unfortunately, there is no one answer of where you should put the investment. It really depends on that individual person. And to be frank, that's why people pay me, because there's a lot more than just, oh, this is the one right answer. Yeah. It actually depends on a lot.
Should I pay off my student loans faster or put that money toward my kids' college savings?
Ooh, that's a good one. I actually want your opinion. I would say that depending on that person's life, there may be merit in you should get your debt paid off first, and that what that might provide is maybe less stress on you that would allow you to be a better parent. That might actually, if you wanted to take it, second, third, fourth order consequences, that might allow you to invest more time in your kid. And what that could allow for them to do is maybe that means that they go from not getting that great of a scholarship to being a few points higher on, let's say, their ACT, and now they're getting a full ride. And that could be way better of a return on investment than having a few $1,000s saved up in a college account.
Yeah, that's huge. Crypto.
The
question on there was, should I invest in crypto or the regular stock market?
Here's what I tell my clients. I say when it comes to speculative investments like crypto, there isn't a lot backing crypto. Like, what is the true underlying backing of fart coin?
Fart coin?
That's a thing, right? That's actually popular.
Yeah, it's like the Hawk to a coin.
It's like Hawk to a coin, where they all got rug pulled and she might be going to jail. Fart coin.
Shout out.
You want to come on Gabe's pod?
Talk about personal branding?
Yeah. Just ruined it all. But like, versus if you buy this U.S. stock market, you have companies that are actually innovating and doing something with that money. What's backing up crypto? Now, some people would say, no, it's always going to be around. I've been around since the beginning of crypto. Initially, it was touted as this is going to replace the U.S. dollar. People aren't saying that anymore. They're saying, no, it's a store of value. It's different, but people are just interested in it. I would say it's more akin to art. Okay? Let's say, people will pay a lot for Van Gogh because people want to have it. But in theory, the only thing backing it is just that other people want it. If people say, actually, Van Gogh, we end up finding that, maybe he wasn't that great of a person and people are less interested, value plummets. Yeah. Whereas if it's a business, they're actually making something. I've been somewhat of a crypto pessimist in that it shouldn't be where everyone's investments are. As I advise my own clients, what I will say is maybe don't put more than 5% of your overall investment portfolio in a speculative asset like crypto.
But John, people are getting rich off of it.
There are some that get rich, and they make a YouTube video saying, I'm rich.
I'm rich.
Very few people make a YouTube video saying, look at how I lost all my money and my wife left me because I put it all in crypto.
Yeah.
Now, do you remember during the GameStop saga?
Yeah, the meme stocks.
Meme stocks, okay? Yeah. One of the benefits is that on these Reddit pages, people were posting their losses and people would congratulate them being honest. A lot of people lost a lot of money.
Really?
Oh my goodness. People would laugh at it. People were losing so much money and they were telling the world, here's how much money I lost. A lot of people lose money in that world. So a few people get rich, but very, 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 very few. And you are most likely going to be the person that loses everything on it. Yeah. Now, not all, again, Bitcoin's a little bit different because it has so much of a name recognition. But still, though, I don't think that should take the place of your normal investments that we know work over time. We don't know if Fartcoin's going to work.
We don't know. The jury's not out on that yet. Quickly to wrap this up here, tell us about Alpha Omega Wealth Management.
Yeah, so Alpha Omega Wealth Management, it's my financial planning practice. Yeah. Work with, I have clients of all ages, but I typically work with people that are approaching retirement or are just in retirement because there's so many of these planning strategies that you can implement that can truly change the trajectory of your retirement. But maybe more interesting is maybe what we're going to be doing from this class. You want to talk about that? Yeah. Which is different from my one job. This is call it the quarter job.
Yep. So John and I are in the process of creating essentially a financial advising course.
I would say not necessarily a financial advising course, but I would say like a personal finance course.
Personal finance, yeah, much better way to say it. Of kind of, taking this conversation and giving it to people in kind of more in-depth, but bite-sized chunks where they can understand it and then apply it to their life instead of them having to go get a financial advisor and pay the fees if money's tight, this and that. You just buy the course and then now here's the playbook. You're going to follow the playbook. It's going to guide you in the right direction so you can approach that financial freedom that a lot of people want to accomplish.
And it's not necessarily going to replace someone's advisor or be in lieu of that, but what it can do is it'll give you a good framework, and probably for a lot of people it might be the first time they've really thought about personal finance. And I think the benefit is our goal, right? You have your job, right? You teach and you are a content creator, and you do a really good job at it.
Thank you.
My primary job is my wealth management practice. So what we're trying to do with this, we will probably still charge a little bit of money for it because it actually people then have skin in the game. My goal is, I think we're just going to undercut the personal finance market. For these other people, that's their job, is they're putting out, I would say, cringy videos to get you to buy their course because that's their only job. I think you and I are just out here to like help teach people about things in life. You're doing that with your job, but this is kind of like a fun way where you're a much better teacher than I am. You're in teaching. I happen to also teach personal finance, and it's important to a lot of people, important to a lot of your followers. I don't know. Let's just undercut the market with like an ultra cheap, very good personal finance course that you can take. Do it on your own time. It's different from like a college course because if you're taking it in college, you have tests and you have more incentive to go to class. This will be a little bit different than that, but I don't know. I think it should be pretty exciting.
Awesome. And it's something that we're both passionate about. It's something that John has dedicated a career toward. And I look at kind of the target demo of this course. It's the teacher. It's the person that is doing their best. They're in a noble profession. They're trying. They're working hard. It's the nurses. It's those people that fit into that pay range where they are in a job where they are not making buku bucks, even though they deserve it.
Yeah.
Well, they also deserve to have affordable financial advising and advice to help them, and just the tips and tricks in the playbook for a cost that isn't going to really affect the bank that much.
I mean, we haven't necessarily talked about exactly what the price is going to be. A one or two Starbucks coffee cups, that perhaps could change the rest of your life. It's a pretty good, as we say, ROI, return on investment. I don't know. I think it should be pretty fun.
So in a couple of months, we'll have the course ready. And if this is something that you're interested in the description, there will be a waitlist link. So you'll be one of the first to be onboarded. You'll get the class, and then you'll be approaching financial freedom before you know it.
Yeah, approaching financial freedom. I think we'll probably start off with the class being like heavily discounted. One, to get feedback from people who want to do it right away. At the end of the day, we want it to be helpful.
Yeah.
This isn't necessarily like a money-making venture for us. It's mainly about getting this out to people and having people that have skin in the game and want to set themselves up on a good foundation. You can gift it if you're older and you've done a good job, but maybe you want to gift this to a niece or nephew or your kids because they maybe don't listen to you. Maybe they would listen to us. Something like that.
Yeah, well, everybody, thanks for tuning in. If you have questions for John, you can check him out on Instagram. John, what's your Instagram?
The Instagram, we'll put a link probably in the video. I think it's at Finance Professor D is what it is.
It's an awesome profile picture.
I appreciate that. Yeah, with my class, that's like what I have for, on our like class software. I put that out there. Tell kids it's going to be a wild time. But yeah, feel free to just reach out if you have questions. I'll happily just answer questions that you might have because to me it's really fun. I just like helping people in the industry. So
we appreciate you watching. John, any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. For educational purposes only, this video was. Nothing in this video should be considered financial advice. Educational purposes only. Please consult a tax, legal, and/or financial professional before making any decisions.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.